already, so we have no further comments at this time.
Okay.
Hi, Will Ryder, the Planning Department. I have a few notes here. Your zoning is commercial intensive, and your future land use map is, your future land use map designation is commercial. That's good for what you're wanting to do. Now, it's also situated in the Timber to Tides design overlay. So all of the architectural standards and the design standards of Timber to Tides would apply to this project as well. I'll preface this by saying Timber to Tides. Do you know anything about it or heard of it?
I have heard of it. I haven't done a project
Okay.
all the way through design and permitting in the Timber Tides yet, so I'd love to hear
Okay.
what I'm up against.
It's, if you think of it as like a new urbanist type of design where there's a lot of emphasis on aesthetic architectural standards, creating a sense of community, having green spaces and gathering areas and those sorts of things with the more intense developments really being around those nodes like you would have at US 17 and SR 200. And it's and kind of, if you think of like old downtown districts with buildings pulled up to the front, and that's what's envisioned. That's what was adopted by the county commission, and it roughly extends from a little bit west of 95, but east of 95 down to the Shave Bridge, and interrupted by ENCPA Wildlight in a couple places. So, with that in mind, here's some of the things, some of the highlights that would apply to this project. So, again, you've got the entitlements. The property has not been rezoned to T5, but it's in the T5 transect. So you still have the entitlements of the commercial intensive zoning district with all of the with those permitted uses. But again, you got the design architectural standards of Timber to Tides. So the articles 44 and 45 of the Land Development Code would apply. This is recorded, so you don't necessarily have to write all these down, but I'll highlight them, and you can go back and listen to the video as well. 44.06.01 has a chart, and it's got your site design and transect standards. It talks about building frontage, setbacks, building height, and those sorts of things. So one of the highlights from that chart is there's a 90% build out requirement on the front. So your front setback is zero, is a minimum of 0 and a 10-foot and a maximum of 10 feet on the front. So 90% of the building, or the building, one, it would have to be turned from the design that you have and extended, with 90% of it being between 0 and 10 from the front property line. Now, there are some exceptions that are not. If you went to Muni Code online, buried in an ordinance, you're not going to see it because it was just recently adopted, but there were a couple things, exceptions to that frontage build out. Calculation of minimum frontage build out shall exclude access drives, pedestrian walkways, required setbacks, and any required buffer or screen. So that would give you a little bit of a break there. But again, the 90% frontage build out is a big one. And then your side setbacks are 0, minimum setbacks, and rear setback of 10 feet. You know, the big one is the front there. Mm-hmm. The other thing is LDC Land Development Code 44.06.02 has a civic or social space requirement. Those are things like there's some choices there that you have with the T5. There's a passive park, a playground, there's a plaza, square, but the plaza and the square have minimum size requirements of a ½ acre. So there is a requirement for this sort of social green area that's required in this district. We might, if you're interested in pursuing this, and I hope you are, we might, let's have subsequent conversations about that and see if there's some way to maybe employ those to the frontage requirement somehow or another. That, I don't know if that's gonna be an option or not, but we've been in discussion with that. And again, this is a new code for a lot of us, so sorting through all of it, and there may be some ways that perhaps would be helpful on that. The main entrance of the building, with that new urbanist sort of design in mind, the main entrance of the building's gotta face US 17. Of course, if you've gotta have that much frontage, it would be fronting that way anyways, I would imagine. Table 44.5, or 44-5, you have a required private frontage. That's the area between the front of the building and the public right of way. It's not a big area, but there's different types of frontages in there that you can look at and pick one. The edge conditions and the need for a multi-use trail, or the requirement for a multi-use trail, that's a requirement as well. I think a multi-use trail in a place where a sidewalk would typically go, but I think Tim will probably talk more about that. The landscaping requirements are in 45.04.05, and the lighting and sign requirements are in 45.04.06. Like all projects, even outside of Timber to Tides, LDC 45.05.06, you have dumpsters, mechanical equipment, service areas. Those have to be screened, have to be to the side or the rear of the building. Architectural standards, now there's a lot of them, don't need to go through them all in this, there's 45.05.02 is your architectural standards. That'll give you the requirements on material requirements, facade requirements. You're located in an activity center called the Yulee Historic Activity Center. I know Yulee Historic's in there, that's the name of the activity center. And you have to pick a different, you would have like historic, mercantile, mid-century. There's several architectural styles in there, and the building would have to mirror one of those. And you've got some flexibility in there with building materials and that sort of thing. But that's all laid out in 45.05.02. And then the parking, of course, with the building, the parking's required to be to the rear, and of course that would be what you'd need to do anyways if you shifted this building location. And the other one that's a big one, maybe I saved the worst for last, is in the activity center. The building's got to be 2 stories. And I was looking for anything in the code where the second story did not have to be functional. Haven't found anything like that. So you got to have 2 stories. But again, I think if you're interested in this, I think it might be helpful to have a meeting with planning staff and development services, probably with Tim and Caleb, to try to, because we want, I mean, it sounds like a lot, and it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but it's it's doable. Just depends on your interest in pursuing it. But we're more than happy to help you through this.
You had me
That
up
may
until
sound-
2 stories.
What's that?
You had me until 2 stories. I was
Yeah.
okay with everything else.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I probably should have said that earlier, but I mean, we do want to help you through this process the best we can with working within the regulations, and that may sound strange after everything I just read off, but yeah.
Is there a process where we can request relief from the 2-story requirement?
There are some, we'll call them relief provisions, since you use that word, I like that word, in Timber to Tides, but the ones that come to mind is the planning director, Elizabeth Back, my boss. She has some leeway on giving a bit of leeway on the frontage build-out requirement. It's like 10%, I think, is what it is. Don't hold me on that, but there are some provisions in there. Not for the second story requirement, I don't think. But there is some leeway for the frontage requirement, and I think there are a few other points in there too. Not sure if they would be helpful or not, but again, I think maybe trying to get creative with some of the green space requirements and that sort of thing might be helpful. I guess, yeah, I was trying to just sort through this with, you've got, that 90%, that's a long orthodontics office.
Yeah.
Or, you could, of course, if you didn't have that build-out requirement, then you could accomplish some of that, with the second floor, but the second floor and the frontage requirements is a tough one. But let's talk, you'll obviously have the things that you can get relief on. You obviously have an access drive that won't count. There are some required setbacks, required buffering and screening, those edge conditions. Maybe that could be helpful, and then maybe looking at it with this green space requirement could actually be helpful, because obviously you're trying to reduce the length of that to be able to go that way without getting absurd on square footage for what you're trying to do. So be happy to meet with you
Okay.
at any point.
Yeah.
No.
And do the architectural standards just apply to the frontage or to multiple sides of the building?
What's viewable from the right of way, but the materials have to be consistent all the way
Okay.
around. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right, Tim Davidson with Development Services. I'll just, Will had mentioned a little bit about the edge zone in the timber to tides. That section of 17 is called an urban edge zone. And you can find all this, it's on the planning section of the website, the whole timber to tides document. So figure 45.05 identifies that urban edge zone. It's illustrated in actually figure 45-19. Anyway, of note, there's an 8-foot minimum public seating zone, 10-foot trail, which Will mention, and an 8-foot street buffer. You'd have to incorporate. The rest of my comments don't have anything to do with timber to tides. I'll give you some relief from that.
Okay.
But obviously, US 17 is a DOT road, so any improvements in 17 will have to be permitted through FDOT. You will, and you're showing it, you require a connection out to the trail. That sidewalk needs to be 6 foot minimum. That's easy.
Yeah, I don't believe it is now, and we don't have right-of-way there to make it wider without getting into the utility zone, which I don't know if the DOT is gonna want us to extend that sidewalk right up to the back of their curb. What do we do in that situation?
And I'm not sure if I understand what
Do
we
we,
make.
do we need to widen the sidewalk along the frontage? 'Cause
Yeah,
right,
it needs to be a 10-foot trail. Right now, I think it's a 5-foot sidewalk.
yeah, and I don't know that we have 10 foot between the right-of-way and the back of curb. If we don't have enough right-of-way to accommodate that, do we need to give you an easement? Do we get to
An easement is
reduce the width?
doable, yes.
Okay,
Sometimes the trail does meander onto property, so an access easement
okay.
works. Per BSCC Resolution 2019-174, all development requires a traffic impact analysis. First step in that is to call our traffic engineer, Andrew Avant, to discuss the requirements. We'll look at trip generation and so forth, and surrounding intersections, just to determine what will be needed, if anything, to be analyzed.
Okay.
I want to call to attention, Article 10 of the roadway and drainage standards is our stormwater management requirements. It largely aligns with St. John's. But I will note a couple things that sometimes people miss. The pond has to contain 100-year storm, top of bank needs to contain 100-year storm. And we do require a stormwater maintenance plan. Once you get approval for the site, we have construction inspection fees. Those are listed online. We have an engineering checklist in the development services section of the website that'll help you along with your eventual SAP submittal. And I always like to note that section 621 states DRC approval shall be obtained prior to commencement of all projects prior to breaking ground.
Okay. One of the things that the developer, the owner wanted to do was maximize parking on the site, which I know your LDC has a 10% limitation over the code minimum parking as a maximum. Is that right?
I think that's more
Planning. So the question is, if they proceed with this project and half the building is a space that's vacant, can we assume a worst case intensity to maximize the parking for that situation? Or how do we make sure we don't exceed a maximum number, but yet at the same time maximize the amount of parking we put on the site.
Yeah, let me go back through the parking requirements on that and get back with you on that.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy Van Zandt, Environmental Health. I know you said you're, gonna connect to JEA. We just need a letter of availability from them because currently there are no utilities there.
Okay. Yeah, we could provide that. I think we actually already have that. There's no water out there, but they're telling us there's a force main on the east side of US 17, and we can share that with you.
That's fine. We just need a letter saying that they can provide that to you.
All right? No problem.
That's it.
Good morning, Kevin Jones, Fire Marshal's Office. As there is no hydrant within 500 feet of this building or this proposed location, you would either have to have a pond, excuse me, a pond with a 50-year drought study that has a dry hydrant. But if you go that route from the placement of the dry hydrant, there has to be 100 feet distance before you actually have a structure. I don't know if that's going to work in this configuration, but since there has to be some alterations to where the building is facing and everything, that may present a possibility. Outside of that, you have to have a tank that is capable of holding the required water supply for the fire flow for that building. Roadway, obviously, US 17 is gonna be wide enough, and the parking or drive-through is gonna be wide enough, at least 20 feet wide. It's not gonna be considered a dead end because you don't have 150 feet going into a driveway. You don't have to worry about that. According to what Will has said, since the building is gonna face on the front, anything that deals with a fire apparatus will actually just come right down 17. So the biggest thing is going to be providing water supply, a water source for this area.
Yeah, we were hoping to do a dry hydrant on a wet pond. We're negotiating with CSX right now on that, so it may not be an option. But could you repeat what you said about the 150 feet from a dry hydrant? What is the
It's
requirement
100
there?
feet. So when you have a hydrant, you're gonna have a hydrant come up from that location, the fire code requires at least a minimum of 100 feet distance between the hydrant and the building.
100 feet, okay.
That's correct.
And then when we reconfigure the parking, I don't know if we'll exceed the 150 feet dead end, but can you give me the fire apparatus specs so we could make sure we could turn you around?
So if you had a driveway that was 150 feet from the front of the property, it requires a turnaround, which would be the T-shape, because you're not gonna be able to get a cul-de-sac here.
Okay.
But it doesn't look like that's going to be the case here.
And if we don't want to do a tank and we can't do a pond because of CSX, do we have the option to do a fire well?
You do not.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Did you have any questions?
No, you've answered all my questions.
Perfect.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will conclude tab A and move into our approvals. Tab B, SP 25-032, Green Magnolia Estates. Does anyone have any comments?
Building department has no comment.
Planning department has no comment.
Development Services has no comments.
Environmental Health, no further comments.
Fire Marshal Office has no comments.
Tab C, SP 25-055, Cherish Eating Disorder Expansion. Does anyone have any comments?
Building department has no further comment.
Planning department has no further comment.
Development Services has no comments.
Environmental Health, no further comments.
Fire Marshal Office has no further comments.
And with that, we will conclude today's meeting.
Recording stopped.